Hi, so today I'm going to be talking about how to begin studying anatomy. Hi, my name is Escobar. I'm a storyboard artist on The Simpsons television show. I've been working on the show for over 25 years now, and I'm here to empower you. So there was a question asked by somebody who was beginning to learn to draw anatomy, but they have a difficult time knowing where to begin. So here's what they ask specifically, and then I'm going to talk about how how I tend to study anatomy and how I recommend others to study anatomy. That's helpful. This isn't an absolute, this isn't dogma, but it's good tips and tricks here. So it says, so anatomy, how do you learn it? I have read that you should start with a skeleton and then put the muscles and then etc. But people say that when you start with the skeleton, you should try to break down all the biggest parts into simple shapes, which is good. Actually, it's good advice. Like the rib cage can be an oval or just a square. But how do I do that? Okay, so he says, 1, am I supposed to make a gesture drawing? 2, and bring forward my anatomy books and look up a page with full skeleton, like in Atlas of Human Anatomy by Stephen Robert Peck, which is a book I'm going to be talking about. And then 3, and then draw all the biggest skeleton parts on my gesture drawing. Okay, so all of these things are actually kind of right. All right, so let's talk about this. It could be overwhelming because the anatomy, the human anatomy is just so complicated, right? What I'm going to do is I'm going to be kind of talking a little bit about the process of drawing anatomy and any kind of anatomy, whether it be animal or human. I'm going to be explaining what some of the simplicity part is about, some of the gesture part is about. Like a lot of what was asked is kind of the steps, but because there is no example, it's difficult to understand what is meant by all of those things. So first, for example, I'm going to show you an image here. This is an image that I copied from this book. I was learning to draw quadrupeds, right? So I took an image from this book. I don't know where it is. It's in here somewhere. Yeah, but anyway, so I took it and I would take these images and then I made a copy of it just to get my head around the skeleton, right, of a quadruped. And the reason I did this wasn't because I thought that by doing this I would immediately be able to draw the anatomy perfectly. I did this so that I could get my head familiar with the with an animal skeleton, right? You could do this with the human skeleton too. You could just copy it. All right. So then I moved on to another book. I mean, another page, and then I copied that. Now, if you want to do this with the human anatomy, there are 2 books that I could recommend for you to do. You could use this book, The Atlas of Human Anatomy. It has a lot of really good drawings, and it's got anatomy in here too. So you could try copying the skeleton and the muscles off of one of these, off of this book, or you could do the same thing with this book here. I actually like this book a little bit more because the drawings of the anatomy and the skeletons and stuff is much cleaner than the other one. So let's see if I can find a skeleton, a full skeleton, and it's because the other one's a painting and this one is this one's are drawings. I can't seem to find the page here, but I would recommend this one a little bit more for copying the skeleton. So, and again, this is not going to, you're not going to memorize this, okay? And also, if you notice that when I copied this, you could see that there's an underdrawing in here. I would draw like a general shape in here, and then I actually went in with ink, just because I kind of wanted to match a little bit more of the actual drawings in the book. But I did really go in here. I did a very basic very basic shapes, and then I eventually went in with ink. And I did the exact same thing with this drawing here. So I did it a few times. I wanted to just get familiar with the actual anatomy the way it is finished. I wanted to know what it felt like, the skeleton actually felt like, what the things were. However, this kind of anatomy breakdown is not what you're going to be drawing whenever you're drawing a figure of any kind, including an animal. This is like right here. So what I ended up doing here is I ended up breaking down the skeleton into those basic shapes that that tends to be spoken about. You want to break down the anatomy into basic shapes. See how this skeleton, see how this head is just a circle with a little pointy thing in here, and this is because of this. It's just a basic shape for this skull, right? And it's very, very simple. The rib cage is broken down into an oval, and the idea here is that we're trying to capture just the gesture of this stuff. See how this goes up and around? So you want this to go up and around, boom, boom, and then this pelvis is broken down into a very, very basic kind of like four-cornered shape. And then what we're doing here with the legs is we're capturing the rhythm of the bones, the way that the bones come down and around. But the tricky part here of putting all these things is the proportions. Like, make sure that when you're breaking these things down, see how I put this arrow, this rotates this way, this rotates this way, but when I'm capturing the rhythm of these bones, because the rhythm of the bones actually, in the case of quadrupeds, actually makes a difference. But see how this rhythm comes down this way, that way, and that way. So, but what you want is make sure that the proportions are in the right spots, so that when you break this down into very simple shapes, you're able to do this. And really, one of the things that was puzzling me when I was breaking down this animal skeleton was how to break down the shapes. What I ended up doing, fortunately for me, was that I had some handouts from some Disney handouts where they were kind of talking about quadrupeds. I think they were breaking down, I forgot what movie, but anyway, they were breaking down quadrupeds, and they had examples of how to animate a quadruped, and here's the basic shapes you could use. And so what I ended up doing was I looked at that handout, and then I just basically stole the simple masses and shapes that they had come up with, and then I used those to do this, because I didn't know how to do it. So if you're lost, if you have no idea where to go, then go to online, see if there's anybody who's already done it, and then steal their formula and then adopt it for yourself. You could use that, and that's what I did. I adopted the way that the quadrupeds were broken down by the Disney animators. And then using that, I then went in here and I started making notes for myself, looking at the way, see, so it wasn't just stealing their thing. Then I had to go in and I had to make sure that I understood it. Like, if I was to teach it, what would I do? I need to know what this actually is. And so I would break down the quadrupeds into very basic shapes, and then I would like see if I couldn't understand the bones myself, right? And then I actually took some photos, and then I would draw the animal the animal in that pose, but in a skeleton. So I would see if I could look through the skin of the animal and break it down into its skeleton parts, but in simple shapes. Do you see? And then I would do the same with the head. I would break down these things. So I think I'm skipping ahead. This is not these sketches are not in order, but I'm going to show you what I did to break this down. But that's what I did. These are, I think, out of photographs, and then I would try to see what working through the animal actually looked like here. So just drawing these shapes and drawing the skeleton the way it is. Here's more here, and I did the same thing with the muscles. I copied the muscles, and then here I broke down a human arm and then a dog arm to see how, because I'm much more familiar with the human arm than with the dog arm, so I wanted to make sure I understood what the similarities were and how they were different, and how all these things worked. And I did that here with the head here, with the anatomy. I would test myself to see if I understood the anatomy here. With the photos here. Oh man, I don't think I have the. So I unfortunately I don't have. I thought I had more of my drawings here. Let me see if I can. Okay, I'm sorry. I thought I had the scans up or down, but I'll just show you here. So I did draw the skeleton. So in order to be able to do, say, a breakdown of this kind of skeleton face here, I did draw some skulls, right? And then I would try to draw them out of my head in the bottom here in red. I would try to do some skulls myself out of my head, testing myself out. And then I went in and I did, so here's the breakdown of the head. This very simple shape like this. And on top of this very simple shape, I would draw the skull. And I made notes for myself as to what lines up with what, so I could remember when I did this, so that I could then later on, when I drew actual, dog skulls, dog heads, and then I would test myself here with the anatomy. So when I drew an actual dog, I understood what I was looking at. So that's kind of the way you would break something down. Every part of the human body is when it comes to anatomy, it's very complicated. There's some very complicated things. So really quick, I am going to sketch out really fast something that I like. I'll show you how I'd break down a human body. So with the human body, we'd have something like this. If I was just drawing the skeleton, I would make sure there'd be something kind of like this, right? Like that would just be the skeleton. That would be the general shape. but it would be simple. Then we'd have something like this. And then you could put, oh, and this would be straight. So we're looking at rhythms like this, right? And then you would put anatomy on it. I would recommend, if you want to look at a skeleton again, then I would take out a book like the Atlas of Human Anatomy or something like that, and then I would try to just copy the bones. But when you're but this is the preliminary idea. This is where you're getting most of the of your basic foundation. Is very, very simple. You don't start anything too complicated, right? And you would do the same with the head. Something very simple, nothing complicated. I mean, from the front. Something very simple, nothing all that complicated. It's probably like this. Very, very simple stick figure stuff. So, in a way, it is kind of gesture. This is actually needs to be much, much bigger. I think my proportions are off, but you get the idea. So it doesn't have to be complicated. You don't start with the most complicated things. You start with something basic and simple, a small breakdown of the anatomy. If you're studying the anatomy, that's what you want, right? Something simple, but you want to get the proportions right. Mine's not. My proportions are a little bit off, but that's the idea. You want to get, if you're studying the skeleton, that's you kind of want something rough, and then you tighten it up. You start adding all the detail. You look at your anatomy book, and then you start adding all the details. When it comes to drawing the actual muscles, and you want to start learning the muscles, ideally you want to start somewhere like what we were talking about. When you do figure drawing, you start with gesture, and then you add structure to it. You add solidity, you add structure. I'll link to some videos of me doing some figure drawings and talking about gesture. All of that is the foundation from which you can study anatomy. So, for example, if you're going to start drawing something out of your, there are two ways that you can do this. You could do what I did with the animal anatomy and look at reference, and then try to see through it with X-ray eyes and break down the person in the skeleton. And then also you could do the same with their anatomy. You could take their skin off and use that as your bouncing off point to study the anatomy. And that's extremely, extremely important and very useful. So I may actually just make a video of just doing that so that you can know what that looks like. I'm not going to do that right now because this is already going long. The other thing you can do is if you're doing something out of your imagination, is you can practice kind of just coming up with poses yourself and then trying to draw anatomy on top of that. That's another way of doing it. That's fine. But the idea still is to start with gesture and then structure and then anatomy. That's three steps. So I'm like 1, 2, 3. So you start with, say, the gesture. So you start with the gesture, right? You you say that, okay, I'm gonna do this. I'm just making it up as I go. I have no plan for this drawing. Okay, so say this is what you want. You want, okay, that gesture. And then you want some kind of solid structure. So that's when you start adding a little bit more simplified tubes, body formulas to add some solidity to your drawing. This is a tube. This is a tube. See, so this is still simple. This is a tube. A tapered tube. This is a tapered tube. This is a tapered tube. This is a tapered tube. And this is a tapered tube. You could preferably add direction, solidity to your tapered tube, so you know what the perspective is, you know, what the solidity is. But now you have something to put your anatomy on to, right? And then you get out your anatomy books, and this is what you put your anatomy on top of. What books should you use to learn to simplify the anatomy? There's one, the books that I showed you that that show you the full anatomy are good so that you could understand the full anatomy. However, you don't want to be drawing fibers all the time. You kind of want to break down the anatomy into even simple shapes or masses, or just grasp the masses is what you want. And the masses need to be anatomically sound, but they need to be just masses. I would recommend two books for that. I would recommend Bridgman and Hampton. Hampton breaks down the anatomy shapes even cleaner than Bridgman, but Bridgman also breaks down the shapes in a very boxy way. Both of them are good. They're very complementary. I would probably go with Hampton first and then Bridgman, just because I found with the people that I coach that Hampton is clearer. And then what you would do is you would take what Hampton has basically broken down, and then you would want to apply, see, because he's even gotten, he kind of has these in tubes and stuff. And then he's actually shows you formulas to break down the anatomy, but then he breaks down the body shapes, the shapes into slightly simple masses. There are some even simpler masses here, but he does have a breakdown, and they're very, very simple breakdowns of the anatomy. In fact, you could actually just copy this instead of any of the other books that I showed you. And so at this point you would get Hampton, and again, I think my proportions are off. You can tell I'm a cartoon artist because I'm always drawing the characters slightly out of proportion. But you could add the anatomy here to this, and then you can add the pecs, and you can do this in steps. Like you don't have to do the entire human body all at once. So I'm doing the whole entire body all at once here, but what you can do is you could break this down into small bite-sized chunks. So for example, you can just do, you could actually just go through and do it in the steps that are in Bridgman or Hampton. You could start with I don't know, the head first. It starts with the head. I actually don't recommend the head first. I would actually start with the torso first. You can start with the torso and then just do just pecs at first, and then go to the abs, and then do pecs and abs, and then just add to it. You know, then you do the muscles here on the side. So pecs, abs, and then you do the muscles up here. So little baby steps. Just do all the tiny little baby steps. Little by little, you start building up that information. And you start to remember, because you've been doing it in small baby steps, you start to remember what is what, how it works, what works with what, stuff like that. But then little by little, all of this stuff you begin to learn. But that's how I would study anatomy. It's a complicated subject to get into, and these are just basic tips as to what to do to study the anatomy. But the more you do it, the more you start to memorize the muscles and how they work and things like that. And so again, Hampton, Bridgman, and Atlas of Human Anatomy, and what's the other book? I forgot. Artist Anatomy, stuff like that. They're all helpful. They're all what you're basically trying to do is simplify and break everything down, but in small baby steps, right? Like, that's the idea. So when it comes to, say, the full anatomy, ideally what you want to do is something similar to what you would do if you're figure drawing. You want to actually start with gesture and structure, and then start adding the anatomy on top of that. But in baby steps. This is the kind of thing that I tend to do with the people that I coach. I actually guide them through this step by step. So I actually go, okay, now it's today we're going to be doing torsos, and then I would give them some exercises. They give me back the exercises. I would go over it, see if they're missing anything, help them in a slightly different approach. If they're having trouble with something, we stick with it until they start getting it, and then we move forward, and little by little they start to get it. So I tend to do that, but you don't. The benefit of that is that you get my feedback. I go back and I give you tips and tricks, but that doesn't necessarily mean you can't do it on your own. And so this is what I'm telling you that you can do on your own. You can just break things down and do this yourself. Test yourself. See if you could do it out of your head after you've done it using the books. And then if whatever you're missing, you go back and then you rework on you work on the stuff that you didn't quite get right. That's what I was doing in my sketchbook when I was doing the dog anatomy stuff. I was going over it, and I was making sure that I was getting it. Whatever I wasn't getting, I would write notes for myself. Like, I would write notes all over the place. What these things are. If I didn't understand it, I'd go back and I'd rework it. So I would really like just that's what sketchbooks are for. That it's for study. It's for trying to figure things out. Okay, one more tip, and that is to go to a website like Sketchfab, where if you're testing yourself, if you want to see what it looks like in 3 dimensions, You go to like a site like Sketchfab, type in anatomy or male anatomy or whatever it is, and then you would get these 3D. I really like this one actually quite a bit, but see how this guy, you could look at it and then you can rotate him around. You could look at the actual muscle, like if you're talking about deltoids or biceps, you could zoom in here and look at the biceps, see how it works, see how the tricep works. So you could look at these muscles and the way that they work. You could actually literally draw from this if you really need to like work something out in your head. You could figure out ways to simplify it for yourself and come up with very simple shapes for these kinds of things. So this is also very useful. It's just good reference for that sort of thing. So even if you want something, if you don't want to buy any of the books, some of the anatomy books, you could use this as the thing to draw from. It's just as good. It's just the idea being that you just kind of want to have some kind of reference that's going to help you, right? All right, so that's my tips. And those are my tips for working out this stuff, learning to draw anatomy for yourself. That's what I would do. That's how I'd approach it. And hopefully this has been helpful. I think I will try to do a video where I break down a human being and work out the anatomy that way, so that you can have an example of how it could be done. If you found this video helpful, then I highly recommend you just like and subscribe. If you want to get personal coaching from me, you can go to the link below in the description of this video where it's my Patreon. There's a tier for coaching there. If you just are interested in drawing in general and don't know where to begin and you can't draw yourself out of a paper bag, then I do have a course that you can purchase. I will also provide the link below to that. And hopefully this has been helpful to you, and I will talk to you next time. All right, bye.